mean, I've seen other heavy metal bands, and I think we're the best. We are the best.
Alright, we're strapped the fuck in. I got the leather, I got the spikes, no whips and chains, but this is a music review, not Roman Polanski's basement. Let's do this! Rocka Rolla!
I didn't think the band was going to actually make it, believe it or not. I thought we'd been doing this, for 2 or 3 years now with this lineup. I sort of decided in the end to call it a day.
I got introduced to Rob, and of course, put it to him, would he be interested to join Judas Priest? If I can remember rightly, Rob was singing along to something like Doris Day on the radio, you know, singing harmonies to, and I thought, oh, that's pretty impressive, you know.
Fucking Doris Day story again. I'll just jump out this window. Kill me now. Kill me now. If I hear this fucking Doris Day story, go on. It's the Doris Day story, isn't it? Well, the story goes that Ian and Ken came over to the house, and I was upstairs having a shower, harmonising with Doris Day. If anything could be fucking Gary in the world than that, I don't know what is. But I wasn't. I refute that till they put me in the earth.
While recent years have seen a rush to reappraise early Priest material as underappreciated classics, and some of this is certainly extended to the first 2 albums, there's simply an immutable truth to confront here. Rocka Rolla is a world-class fucking turd, folks. Classic bands seem to fall into one of 2 categories. Those who recorded their best work early on, then 3 albums in or so pulled their musical backs out and never laid eyes on the creative promised land again. See also Motley Crue and Def Leppard. Or bands who completely shit the bed on the first couple records, only to gradually find their footing a few records in and ascend to great heights for the remainder of their careers. See also Accept, Motorhead, and yes, Judas fucking Priest. While there's no shortage of musical maladies arrayed against the Priest in their freshman effort, the primary affliction is simple. This just doesn't sound like Judas Priest. It sounds like a half-hearted fusion of a half-dozen more popular hard rock bands of the 70s, with particular emphasis on Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Black Sabbath, with little in the no identity to call its own. But even setting aside the album's more derivative qualities, it's just a meandering, ponderous, plodding, spacey, pretentious, insufferably 70s bore. As great as the decade could be, for example, in the movie theater, I think people too often conveniently forget quite how indulgent, pretentious, and idiosyncratic the 1970s actually was as a decade. This album screams the year 1974 so boomingly, you can practically hear Rocka Rolla's producer, replete with bell-bottoms and comically oversized shirt collar, busily de-seeding his pot with the cover of a Led Zeppelin album he'd much rather be clearly producing. Whether it's the shamelessly commercial disco affectations of the title track, or the one riff to bore them all hypnotically repetitive dreck and a half like Never Satisfied or Winter, this album eats a weather balloon filled with dicks. Best track? There really isn't one, folks. I guess Run of the Mill is as close as it comes, largely due to the fact that unlike all the other tracks on the album, at least the drudging pseudo-psychedelic Tony Iommi plagiarism actually builds to something. Even if it has more synthesizers than Yanni's estate sale, make no mistake, it's still dick. It's just slightly fuller, less veiny and anemic dick. Worst track? Throw a fucking dart. I still think Rocka Rolla itself takes the cake, whereas the worst thing you can say for 90% of the album is that it's simply overlong, boring, and slower than a snail on a treadmill. The title track, on the other hand, is overt, shameless, pandering, intelligence-insulting discotheque dog shit. What a fucking pile.
We didn't find our feet till Sad Wings of Destiny in terms of a writing trio, really. And it took us, you know, a little while to settle down, but it really only took us 1 album, and after that, we naturally fell into things.
We shall stay forever.
Welcome to the world, Judas fucking Priest. This is the album Rocka Rolla should have been from the outset. An album written entirely by the current lineup, for the current lineup. You see, Rocka Rolla was actually written almost entirely by Al Atkins, the band's original singer, and frankly, I think this is a case where he should have been the one to record it. Rob Halford just isn't as strong in the lower registers as Al Atkins, with his gravel-gargling blues metal howl, and I truly believe the album suffers for his exclusion. Sad Wings of Destiny, conversely, is written back to front, pretty much, with Rob Halford's Ringwraith shriek foremost in mind, and indeed, Halford hits some of the highest, most piercing notes of his ever-loving career on this record.
You're in for a shock.
While there are still some spacey, somewhat pretentious overtones present and accounted for, this record benefits greatly from the fact that they are by and large actually paid off somewhat, often through a pairing with a more aggressive track flowing out of the more folky, granola-chomping passages, with its one true Achilles heel represented in the form of its raging case of one-side-to-rule-them-all syndrome, with a bloated saccharine shanty by the name of Epitaph being the odds-on favorite to render you fucking unconscious. How in dangling dicks did a fully sober Judas Priest without a firearm pressed to their temple actually name a tour after this fucking atrocious track? So here's the thing about Rob Halford. When he sings really high, or somewhere in the middle, stand the fuck back, he's a cybernetic screaming machine sent to the bowels of hell to pierce your ever-loving eardrums. When he sings low, he sounds like an out-of-work Las Vegas lounge singer with a popped collar, bell-bottom pants, and a fucking fro. Later in his career, Halford would add texture to his lower end with a nice guttural howl, but on these first several albums, keep this fucking Tom Jones on Thorazine sounding goof away from the lower octaves. Best track, for my money, The Ripper. It's punchy, to the point, get it and get the fuck out, 10-ton set of swinging lead nuts heavy metal. Everything Rocka Rolla wasn't. Sad Wings of Destiny, the birth of true Judas Priest.
In seemingly one devastating blow, the punk hit the British Isles, and a lot of musicians were hanging up their rock paraphernalia, which is kind of sad in a way.
Roger Glover was recommended as a producer by CBS, and at the time we were rehearsing in Pinewood Studios in Shepperton. So Roger came down, and which we liked to do as producers. We sat down and we had a good talk. And we decided Roger was right for the album.
And I kind of became aware that any suggestion I came up with was kind of falling on deaf ears. I'd say, how about doing that riff twice? And they'd go, move on to the next one. So at the end of the afternoon, I sort of getting the cold shoulder. So I kind of figured, well, they really don't want a producer.
How does one double down on a cast iron classic like Sad Wings of Destiny? Answer, you fucking don't. You crank the speakers to 11 and you blow its heart out through the back of its fucking spine. And the record you do that with is called Sin After Sin. Ditch the prog rock pretense of earlier outings and fill the resultant vacuum with a triple dose of thunderous Judas Priest riffage, and what you're left with, apart from a few notable exceptions, is clench fist, insert cock, straight ahead heavy metal mastery of the highest possible order. The derivative tendencies of the first two records haven't been completely shed, mind you. On the song Let Us Pray, Glenn Tipton couldn't be trying any harder to be Queen without an afro and a failed marriage, but at least after that exercise in quasi-plagiarism, it ramps up quickly to the trademark proto-speed metal Priest would produce to greater acclaim later in the decade. If there's one bad track on the record, in my opinion, it's without question Last Rose of Summer, a somnolent, comatose ballad utterly bereft of drive, creativity, or dynamics of any description. Dishonorable mention would have to go to Here Come the Tears, but at least that song has a crescendo. Last Rose of Summer just lies there, writhing in musical mediocrity, wallowing in its shameless 70s shittiness, practically pleading with Ken Downing to sever its fucking head and end the goddamn song already. Far and away the best song for me, though, is the terminally underrated Dissident Aggressor, a colossal cacophony of metalliferous might, and a song that may well have single-handedly invented thrash metal. sin after sin. Not perfection to rival Ava Green's Rack, but we're fucking getting there, aren't we, Rageaholics? Next!
Strange part is, the album went on to become sort of a fair-sized hit. Never got paid.
Far and away the darkest, most somber, I dare say even depressive entry in the Judas Priest catalog, which seems an odd thing to say for a record renowned for its thunderous, upbeat opening track by the name of Exciter of all things. But on the whole, from its cryptic cover art to effusive, cheery song titles like Beyond the Realms of Fucking Death, Stained Class wears its melancholy on its sleeve. Fucking literally. I mean, what the fuck am I looking at here? Destro after a gymnastics mishap on the uneven parallel bars? I don't know what Silver Surfer did, but Rainbow Bright is clearly pissed. More to the point, I don't see anyone being stained by class of any description here, but whatever, it was the fucking 70s. What do you want? At least Judas Priest finally stamped an actual logo on this fucking wonky art house bullshit, while the omnipresent veneer of proggy pretense found in earlier efforts is very much in attendance. Stained Class is the album where Judas Priest finally learned the hard lesson that there's no musical statement they can't make in under 4 minutes, amplifying the punchy, fist-pumping posturing of Sin After Sin into an infinitely catchier, more direct package that nevertheless has a profoundly dark edge that isn't easily shaken even after multiple listens. For me, Stained Class is far and away the least comfortable album for me to listen to, and don't mistake that for an indictment, although in a legal sense, sadly, it would eventually come to that. In my opinion, this album is just absolutely superb. One of the full-on fucking gems of this band's discography. But am I surprised two burnouts decided to press a shotgun to their chin and blow their fucking heads off while blasting this record? Yeah, not so fucking much, folks. Worst track? Sorry, motherfucker, I ain't about to pick one. For my money, Stained Class is Priest's very first all-killer, no-filler record. Period. I love every fucking minute of it. Picking the best track is a completely different story, though. Hands down, it's the title track, Stained Class, a pitch-perfect, sleek fusion of the thunderous, catchy riffage of latter-day Judas Priest, coupled with a dark, morose chorus that will just bore farther into your skull than whatever in the front flipping fuck that is. Next!
Up until that moment, the look had not been completely tied in as I felt to the sound. So putting on this kind of stuff, suddenly, you know, you look at yourself in the mirror, you listen to the music, and it just connects.
We never actually sat down and said, oh, yeah, let's all wear leather, you know. It wasn't contrived in any way, shape or form. It's a natural evolving process. It became a very important part of the band's, not just image, but the band's countenance, really.
I was going out on stage every night looking like that. It was like Glenn from the Village People, you know, and people weren't getting it.
Hellbent for leather. Hellbent for leather.
The birth of 80s Priest came 2 years early. Oh sure, the label may read 1978, 79 here in the States, but make no mistake, with its groove-laden, buzzsaw riff work, Rob Halford's newfound heavy metal sandpaper snarl, and more than a few radio-friendly monster ballads, Hellbent for Leather is the true dawn of what would become 80s metal, with all the successes and self-indulgences thereof. Whether it's superior to Stained Class and Sin After Sin or not depends on what you're looking for. If it's the somber, self-hating, paradigm-shattering proggishness of early material, look the fuck elsewhere. If it's a no-bullshit, jugular-bound pop metal masterstroke, Hellbent for Leather is among Judas Priest's uncontested best. Whether it's Stained Class producer Dennis McKay or this album's producer James Guthrie, whoever imparted the forbidden knowledge of how to craft a song that clocks in at less than 3 minutes, well, that's someone that Judas Priest owes a metric shitload of rubles, because over the next 3 decades, this band had worked that $1 million formula like a fucking pommel horse. The standout for me is, without question, delivering the goods. Not the most chart-demolishing commercial titan of Priest's career, but as an opener and a statement of raw intent, a clear indicator that the days of philosophizing and never-ending acoustic intros were well the fuck behind us, delivering the goods sets the table admirably, but doesn't outshine it to such an extent that it precludes the subsequent material from knocking it the fuck clean.
Delivering the goods. Yeah! Delivering the goods.
I love the fuck out of this song. Worst track? Oh, stand the ever-loving fuck back, because while Judas Priest have at long last eschewed their habit of meandering, overlong, sappy, quasi-medieval ballads, they picked up a whole new bad habit. Bought the fuck out power pop ballads, as exemplified by easily their most egregious slab of dick cheese by the name of Evening Star. This song is a violin solo and a banging hot Swedish chick away from being an ABBA song. And cling fast to your cocks, because over the coming decade it's gonna have some company, Rageaholics. All in all, Hellbent for Leather is a necessary bridge between the bell-bottom 70s and the leather-bound 80s, and in my opinion, a much better record than some of the far more celebrated chapters in Priest's career. And speaking of which...
You could always hear, where we lived, a foundry, the big steam hammers. You know, it was part of the Midlands, you could always hear that. So I suppose really, if day after day when that's pounding, you know, you've got some sort of heavy metal rhythm inherent in you right from the word go.
The thump, 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 the thud, thud, thud of the stamping presses was obviously having some kind of deep psychological effect on me that I wasn't aware of.
All right, I'll say it. I am not a British Steel fan. Which isn't to say it's a back alley abortion. Hell, I'm not even saying it's overrated. This is the album with Breaking the Law on it, folks. For that reason alone, you should fucking own it. But to me, much like the album that preceded it, there's just too strong of a late 70s power pop vibe on many of these songs, and thus, I find myself skipping through half of the fucking record. No one's saying it isn't a peerless classic. It is. This album was arguably the battering ram at the head of a fresh, burgeoning battalion bristling with cutting-edge weaponry entitled the New Wave of British Heavy Metal. But to me, British Steel simply doesn't hold up quite as well as the records that preceded and succeeded it. Best track, a searing firebrand by the name of Rapid Fire.
Trampled and sampled on this space condition, brought forth demolition to war.
Classic speed metal, but again, I don't feel it's superior to the up-tempo tracks on the albums immediately before and after it. Hellbent for Leather ruthlessly curb-checks the song for a fact. Worst track, no one with ears can say anything that isn't United. Although Living After Midnight may be the single most repetitive, overplayed sack of shit in classic rock radio, were it not for the existence of AC/DC. Look, I don't hate British Steel, not by a fucking long shot, but it doesn't do a single thing that Hellbent for Leather and Screaming for Vengeance don't do 5 trillion times more effectively. Next!
In Hot Rocking, actually, we set fire to Rob's boots. I mean, we've always sort of encouraged Rob to... And we'd got fire extinguishers to put them out. What we didn't realise, and what Rob certainly didn't realise, is that yes, you can put the fire out, but you can't stop the boots heating up. And he'd got these boots that were strapped up to about here, you know. Of course, he's really frantically trying to undo these, and it took him about a minute to get the boots off, in which time his toes had curled up, they're all black, you know, and smoke.
Of all the albums in the Priest catalog, this is perhaps the one that has grown on me the most. The first time I heard this album, I hated it like Hamas hates planting their missile installations outside of densely populated civilian areas. I dismissed it. I moved the fuck on with my life, and then one day the local record store was having a fire sale for all their vinyl, and I bought pretty much the entire Priest catalog on vinyl for all of $10. As I'm tearing through their careers sequentially, I get to Point of Entry, and I don't know what it was, if the act of sitting with the artwork and booklet in my hand with the sparse desert landscape on the cover kicking my imagination into overdrive. I frankly have no fucking clue, but now I think I legitimately dig this album. In my opinion, it shares the same successes and failings as British Steel. Too heavy on the pop, not heavy enough on the heavy. But unless you live somewhere like here in Phoenix, or maybe in Las Vegas, maybe some regions of California, you almost can't get into the proper headspace for this album. Every time I hop into my car, chuck this into the stereo, and head north until I see nothing but a ceaseless expanse of arid waste at each shoulder as the opening riff of Desert Plains bellows through the speakers, I'm reminded why this is the greatest city and state in the fucking world.
Well, the quick story to this is that when I first came to Phoenix in '79, I think it was, it just blew me away because here was the cactus and the cowboys and the Indians, and I grew up with that as a kid in England, you know, watching the kind of Hopalong Cassidy.
Yeah.
That's showing my age tonight, folks.
Well,
but that kind of
too.
stuff, and to actually get off the bus and see it, it just freaked me out. And this is the most wonderful place in the world. I mean, it's still got that pioneering spirit about it here in the Southwest.
Point of Entry, while not perfect, is the ultimate driving aimlessly across the desert cruising album. It's no wonder Rob Halford wrote most of it shortly after moving to Phoenix. Best track? Bit of a tie, frankly, between the infectious atmospherics of Desert Plains and the just plain gonorrhea fucking catchy Turning Circles. Worst track? Also a tie between the sappy leather-bound bombast of Don't Go and the utterly vapid swing metal stylings of You Say Yes. Priest, the only way I'm saying yes is if the question is, should we leave this abhorrent song off the fucking record? Fucking emphatically goddamn yes. Affirmative. All systems go. We see high dozo. Perflarf. What the fuck is Perflarf? It's a language I just goddamn invented entirely for the purposes of saying yes, Judas Priest. You should leave this song off the cotton pickin' record. Point of Entry and British Steel are two poppy peas in a pod. Neither are bad, but neither are my favorite record either. And I think if we're all being perfectly honest, both are somewhat cynical grabs for commercial success, but very percussive, well-produced, and well-written cash grabs. I am blown clean the fuck away by the fact that more songs from Point of Entry aren't being played in car commercials to this very day. While far from a sales catastrophe, the reviews were in and they were unanimous. The next record needed to be returned to form, a more profound artistic and commercial success on par with their earlier repute. And we all know what the fuck happened next.
We got the title track from the new album for you. This is Screaming for Vengeance!
We have spent so much time in the States now that it's more or less like home to us. It even seems strange to go back to England now and drive on the other side of the road. Great difficulty now in England, and the roads are too bendy there, you know.
From an unknown land and through distant skies came a winged warrior. Nothing remained sacred. No one was safe from the Hellion as it uttered its battle cry, screaming for vengeance. In the year of our Lord 1982, Judas Priest didn't just come back, they roared back with a chromium-plated opus the world would come to know as Screaming for fucking Vengeance. This album is simply a masterpiece. Seamless. Something for everyone. Nary an I undotted or a T uncrossed. You want headbangers? Have some Electric Eye, Chumley. You want speed metal? Screaming for vengeance, kid. Now run along home and don't hurt yourself. Radio friendly or hard rock, you say? Slide your chunky ass on over to You've Got Another Thing Coming. And on and on and on and on the carousel of kick-ass revolves in perpetuity. An album crafted with laser precision for one purpose, and one purpose alone, to to narrowly straddle the line between pop and heavy metal, and it doesn't stray one solitary angstrom in the process. A flawless fucking victory for Judas Priest and one of the finest metal records ever pressed. Best song. For me, it's the groove-laden crunch fest that is Bloodstone. But throw a fucking dart, pal. Nearly everything on this record fucking rips. Worst song? Pain and Pleasure is just a cunt hair weaker than the rest, but even that has its moments. And if you have ever nourished the delusion that Rob Halford was ever in the closet about his latent homosexuality, have a gander at some of these lyrics, or better yet, some of the hairy chestnuts from Island of Domination on the Sad Wings of Destiny album. Yeah, happy cringing, screaming for vengeance, unabashedly recommended. The only burning question, of course, freewheel burning question, you might say, was whether or not the Priest could actually manage to top themselves. And in 1984, we got our fucking answer loud and clear.
For the video, we decided on Love Bites. It all works in with this little Metal Beastie behind us. Costs us a fortune in cat food, this does, you know.
Screaming for Vengeance, as masterful as it was, left a lingering question mark in its wake. It was 1984 and Judas Priest were officially no longer alone at the top. Young upstarts had clawed their way to the apex of Mount Kickass right along with them. Bands like Saxon, Iron Maiden, Wasp, Accept, and Motley Crue. Oh sure, Judas Priest could sell some records. You've Got Another Thing Coming is still played in TV commercials the world over to this very day. It was a motherfucking smash. But what about the metal cred? Could Priest still thrash and headbang and shriek and harmonize the guitars like all the Young Bucks? Well, with Defenders of the Faith, Judas Priest finally put Iron Maiden, Saxon, Wasp, and all the rest to shame. Shit, you people have been watching me rant in front of a poster of this album for the last 2 years at least, so it's not exactly an Agatha Christie mystery whether or not I dig this fucking record. No, I don't. I fucking worship this album. It's the wind beneath my wang. Is it all killer, no filler? Fuck to the no, it isn't. The second half of this album exists after all, folks, and while side B does kick off with classics like Some Heads Are Gonna Roll and Love Bites, it promptly plummets into qualitative oblivion with the likes of Night Comes Down and fucking wallows there until the album fades away, literally with a whimper. But when this album is right, sweet Cyborg Jesus Is It Ever Right, Jawbreaker, The Sentinel, Rock Hard, Ride Free, and Freewheel Burning, which my fellow Rageaholics will be familiar with from my now infamous Top 5 Video Game Music Videos episode, in which I believe I extolled the virtues of nondescript laser beams and greasy metalheads headbanging in arcades.
Things get really out of hand when the guitar solo comes. That's right, every kid in the arcade starts banging their heads, and why the fuck not? It's Judas goddamn Priest. They don't even stop playing the games either. You kids born after 1990 were missing the fuck out. This is what arcades were like every single day.
And if that wasn't enough, Spark Mandrill from Mega Man X is on the cover of this fucking album, nearly a decade before his video game existed, no less. Best track, Rock Hard, Ride Free, a bit more commercial, and frankly the fact that this wasn't released as a single or music video is proof that someone at CBS Records was nursing an inoperable brain tumor or something. Catchy beyond belief. Worst track, three-way tie. The last 3 songs on this album sap the fucking life out of it until the straw starts making that sippy sound. Easily the most blatant instance of filler in the band's 40-year history. In the overall, Defenders, while not the commercial juggernaut that Screaming for Vengeance proved to be, was a definitive statement from the grandfathers of heavy metal. You young bitches, get off our fucking lawn! And it did so without compromising for the sake of commerciality. Which, as it turned out, probably should have been a red flag. All right, bring on Turbo.
Do you know me, lead singer of Judas Priest, idol of millions? Wherever I go, in case folks don't know me, I always make sure I carry my Turbo.
Judas Priest's new album, Turbo. Don't wreck home without it.
Don't let the poppier sound, the teased hair, the amazing technicolored leisure suits deceive you, Rageaholics. This was a dark period for this fucking band, specifically speaking, its singer. Recording of Turbo kicked off with Rob Halford's drug abuse and personal excesses spiraling out of control. As a fellow Phoenix native and thus privy to many a local rumor, let's just say the dude's lifestyle was out of fucking control and leave it at that. Culminating in a grisly scene at his home just a few blocks from where I sit, where his live-in boyfriend blew his fucking brains out right in front of him. I don't care who the fuck you are, how many cc's of Bogota's best is coursing through your think box, you ain't shrugging that shit off, and my very belated condolences to the man and to Rob Halford and to his family. It's been talked about before, but Rob flat out tried to off himself in the aftermath, but somehow managed to survive. The silver lining? Halford finally got off the junk and embarked on his first fully sober world tour in nearly a decade.
You are a non-drinker.
Non-drinker.
And you don't use drugs?
No. No.
Has it always been that way?
It's not always been that way. I'll freely admit that I had my problem with alcohol, and I belong to an organisation that helps me now, and I'm into my eighth month of sobriety, which I thank the Lord for, and a whole bunch of people that work with me. But it didn't work for me, and I was lucky to be saved at a crucial moment in my career personally.
The Black Cloud? The Black Cloud's name was Turbo. Look, Turbo isn't unlistenable. Let's make that one fact crystal clear at the outset. But it's reviled for the same reason that people despise the fuck out of Rocka Rolla, and not for an entirely invalid reason. It just doesn't sound like Judas Priest. Taken as an overproduced AOR record, it's really not a half-bad wheel of smokehouse 80s dick cheese, and features arguably the most technically impressive Judas Priest twin guitar solos ever committed to tape. Worst song? To me, Parental Guidance has always been a righteous fucking pile. Pretty much anything on this record holds up better, up to and including the fucking outfits. Best song? Private Property. Killer riff. Slick, cheesy 80s synthesizer. Everything that's good and unyieldingly fucking terrible about this album in one sleek, overproduced package. And hey, you wanna be pissed? This album was almost featured on the soundtrack to Top Gun, but Judas Priest, in a moment of unbridled retardation, turned it down. I don't know about you, but as much as I love Highway to the Danger Zone, Turbo Lover smokes it like any cylindrical object within reach of Snoop Dogg. Or Rob Halford. Look, someone needs to edit a version of Top Gun and replace Highway to the Danger Zone with Turbo Lover is all I'm fucking saying. Only teasing, Rob. You're the fucking man. Thanks for signing my fight CD. Next!
We were surprised at the sudden, almost like a backlash. People thought it was going to be like Judas Banana Armour Priest or something. God forbid we should ever do that.
Did you have a change of heart then after Turbo? Because Turbo was a bit of a departure, and now I notice in your live show you're not actually doing any songs at all from that album, are you?
That's right, yes. Well, I mean, that's just a simple indication of the fact that we've realised that, particularly for what we're doing now, that's essentially what people want from us. So we're giving you what you want, and we're enjoying doing it, of course, so that's what it's all about.
Well, look, speaking of giving you what you want, check that out again. It's called Ram It Down by Judas Priest, as if you didn't know.
There are people, shockingly stupid people, who the government should preclude from breeding, who believe that Ram It Down is the worst thing Judas Priest has ever recorded. In the States, these individuals are referred to as chest-smacking retards. Overseas, I believe the terminology is, Geordie Shore cast members. Look, I'll be the first to admit Ram It Down has its issues, major issues even. Hell, it wasn't even intended as its own record initially, with the original Turbo concept being entitled Twin Turbos, with the more commercial half being entitled Turbo, and the heavier half obviously being represented by Ram It Down. But bashing a Priest record for falling off in quality at the halfway mark? I mean, have you heard Defenders of the Faith? The second half of that album has more filler than Ellen Page's bra. Night Comes Down Down? Heavy Duty? Defenders of the Faith? I'll take we were contractually required to record 10 tracks for 500, Alex. Priest isn't all the way there yet, but the early shades of Painkiller are beginning to congeal here, and that is a very good thing, as exemplified in earnest by thrashy, riff-tastic, and stand the fuck back homoerotically titled fare like hard as iron. My personal favorite track, though, an equally homoerotic anthem by the name of Come and Get It. No pun intended, but it rips ass. Worst track? Fucking Love Zone. What in pert male titties were they thinking here? I don't know what a love zone is, but I'm reasonably certain you'd have to declench at least 7 major muscle groups to fucking find it. And the only way you're getting me there is if it's a place where they promise to never play this fucking song. Imperfect? Absolutely. But Priest were building to something. And in 1990, we found exactly what that was.
There's been a double shooting.
Okay, whereabouts was the shooting?
Right in my backyard.
Is anybody hurt?
It looks like there's 2 bodies. I didn't want to go over and look.
We were just about to go on stage one night, and a sheriff walked in and gave us a subpoena.
The case against Judas Priest rested on proving that the words "do it" were hidden in the track "Better by You, Better Than Me."
What possible reason could we have for putting messages on an album to encourage our record buying public to go and kill themselves?
And he said, I sure fucked my life up. It was like I had no control over it, because I didn't want to die.
The parents of these boys were suffering, and we were suffering. We were all suffering in that courtroom.
The judge ruled that Judas Priest were not to blame for the suicides of James Vance and Ray Belknap.
Judas Priest popped up in Los Angeles last week, just a few days before being absolved of liability in the Subliminal Messages trial in Reno, Nevada, to make a video for the group's upcoming album, Painkiller.
I mean, we learned a lot of big words, We're gonna, you know...
what was it? Precognitive...
Precognitive subconscious or something.
Superliminal. That's mean, like we're being superliminal now as opposed to subliminal.
Superliminal?
I'll show you. Hey, you! Join the Navy!
Yeah, all right.
I'm in.
The comeback album to end all comeback albums, Painkiller, thundered into existence in 1990 to universal critical acclaim and fairly tepid financial success. But what do you want? It was the 90s, folks. I'm pretty sure good music was outlawed. Society had hung a hard left on Self-Pity Boulevard, and the fantasy metal stylings of Iron Maiden and their Iron Ilk were officially passé. Replaced, it would appear, in perpetuity by a genre that would soon evolve into what we recognize today as utterly innocuous radio rock, something by the name of grunge. But society, yeah, it can eat a bag of dicks because Painkiller fucking rules. For only the second time in their career, Judas Priest had crafted an all-killer, no-filler, metaliferous magnum opus, a record that doesn't even for a moment entertain the faintest mention of letting the fuck up. I can't even pick a best track here. There isn't one. This album in its totality is a sterling reminder that Judas Priest are without fucking peer. My favorite track, however, would have to be Hell Patrol, the ultimate America fuck yeah anthem that Rob Halford claims he wrote about U.S. Air Force bombers that were turning Iraq into a glass crater during Operation Desert Storm. Least favorite song? Can't be done. Although the remastered version of this record includes a song that was supposed to be included on the follow-up to Painkiller, a spindly, noxious turd by the name of Living Bad Dreams. Yeah, fuck the very fabric of that song. Painkiller. Listen to this fucking record. Now, the good news, the Priest had reestablished their musical credibility and soundly refuted any suggestion that they'd fallen behind brash young shitheads like Megadeth or Metallica. The bad news, it'd be the last statement they'd make for almost the entirety of the ensuing decade. As we all know, Rob Halford took the red eye out of Priest in '92, and he wouldn't re-emerge until at least 12 years later.
Lead singer Rob Halford is leaving Judas Priest after 19 years with the band.
It's important for me to be able to to have the freedom to pursue other areas of music that I think are important.
Well, we tried to find out what Judas Priest thinks about Halford's defection, but the band's manager, Bill Kerbishley, said through a spokeswoman that the news is, quote, not worth commenting on.
Much to the dismay of fans who have long wondered what the sequel to Painkiller might have sounded like. Well, I'll tell ya, because Painkiller 2 exists. You see, Painkiller's revolutionary arena thrash sound is actually a joint product between Priest, their brand new drummer, who is actually a fellow Phoenix native, Scott Travis, and world-renowned producer Chris Zankaredes, who years ago helped produce the seminal Sad Wings of Destiny album. Scott Travis and Chris Zankaredes both have ties to one of my favorite heavy metal bands, a Japanese powerhouse by the name of Anthem. You see, Anthem not only toured the United States, I think they only did it once, in 1987, in support of a superb proto-Painkiller-like album called Bound to Break, produced by, you guessed it, Chris Zankaredes. And who were they opening for? Razör fucking X, Scott Travis's band before Judas Priest. With the first several Anthem albums he worked on, I think Chris Zankaredes, he seemed to be gradually piecing together that arena thrash speed metal sound that would come to characterize the entire Painkiller era of Judas Priest. From 89 to 1990, he took a break from Anthem to record Painkiller, and then returned and has produced, since then, every solitary Anthem album since 1992, which I think says something about the esteem he holds the band in. Immediately after producing Painkiller, Chris Zankaredes and Anthem cranked out an absurdly titled album by the name of Domestic Booty, and it sounded a little something like this. Well, gosh, that sounds familiar. And oh, just look who plays keyboards on both this album and Painkiller. Painkiller 2 exists, Rageaholics, and its name, however unrepentantly English it happens to be, is Domestic Booty by Anthem. Listen to that shit. Next.
The Priest is back!
After the untimely departure of Rob Halford so he could toss the twin salads of Pantera and Nine Inch Nails, Judas Priest, well, they end it. As in officially. I mean, how do you replace a metal god? The short answer is you don't. Just ask Queen. Oh, sure, they've had Paul Rogers sing, and some fagaloon with false vibrato from American Idol front the band in the past, but that ain't Queen, and they aren't saying it's Queen either. It's Queen plus insert singer for hire. Priest set about making a short list of singers, including some major fucking names from Ralph Sheepers of Primal Fear to Sebastian Bach of Skid Row fame, and even Devin Townsend. But when the drummer brought in a tape of a Priest cover band named British Steel, fronted by a 20-something scream machine named Tim Owens,
could not believe how similar he sounded to Rob Halford. We had to go to the stage. We had to go look and see.
Julie Vito and her cousin Crystal Lentine were not only fans of British Steel, they were also friends with Judas Priest's drummer, Scott Travis.
Scott Travis, he's the drummer. The other American in the band said, they don't believe it's your voice on the videotape. They think it was dubbed in somehow, and this isn't really you singing it. So here is Judas Priest not believing it's me. And I said, it's me. Just get me there and I'll show it.
They rightly chucked that short list off a short cliff. After flying him to Great Britain for an audition, Owen stepped into the recording booth, and within 2 lines of singing the Sad Wings of Destiny classic The Ripper, he'd earned himself a new nickname and the gig singing in Judas fucking Priest. Judas Priest didn't replace a metal god, they created a new one, Ripper Owens.
I auditioned and I sang the song Victim of Changes. Then I asked if I could sing The Ripper, so I sang it, and after I got done, Glenn called me Ripper right away and just kept doing it.
It was useful that night. Down the pub, we kept saying, "Get the drinks, Ripper," and
Rob did a good job, and hopefully we know Tim's going to do just as good a job, if not better.
I believe better. That's my opinion.
Plus Tim ain't gay.
And rip he fucking does. As the very first album with the band, the ludicrously titled Jugulator, features some of the most piercing, full-chested, and sustained motherfucking banshee shrieks ever committed to a Judas Priest record, Halford or no Halford. And the album, while not immune from filler, this is Judas Priest after all, does enjoy some unfairly disregarded would-be classics, albeit ones that are almost without exception sullied by the tired late 90s tech thrash trope of overlong pseudo-atmospheric intro noise. The song is called Death Row, motherfucker! Were we really in such dire need of a graphic reenactment of daily procedure during execution before the opening riff of the song kicks the fuck off? I mean, do what you do best and let your music tell the story. By some wildly improbable series of personal epiphanies, Judas Priest do in fact one day acknowledge that this otherwise excellent album was actually ever fucking recorded? Yeah, someone needs to do a remastered version and take a chainsaw to those fucking intros. Best track, Bullet Train. If this speed metal locomotive had torn out a Painkiller station with Rob Halford as the conductor, you would have rightly appraised it as the merciless classic it fucking is, and don't deny it. The only problem, of course, is that by 1997, Rob Halford couldn't hit the scream at the beginning of this song. Yeah, truth is a bitch, and so are the whining irrelevant maggots that hate on this album. Worst track... Really, Jugulator's only vice is the tedious tandem of forgettable filler tracks like Brain Dead and Abductors to a lesser extent, the latter of which actually boasts a couple interesting bits. And really, complaining about filler on a Priest record, I mean, have you heard British Steel? Judas Priest, you have tried so comically hard in recent years to whitewash this record from the band's history. I feel like I should be holding a blank fucking jewel case right now. But Jugulator is an important record. It's the next logical musical progression from the groove-laden arena thrash metal of Painkiller. It discovered Ripper Owens, arguably the single most impressive raw talent of the last 20 fucking years of metal. And oh yeah, that's right, it's the only reason you're still a fucking band. Jugulator, one of, if not my uncontested favorite in the storied catalog of the Priest, and yes, bitch, I'll say it, it's one of their best. Fucking deal with it. Unapologetically recommended. Wimps and haters, leave the hall. Next.
And now, let me show you the bunks on this one. Now, these are the bunks. We sleep in these bunks, right?
Thank you, KK.
Can you see? It's very limited space, but... And then, this is Ripper.
Hey, you guys woke me up,
and
man.
This is why he's called Ripper.
Don't wake him up.
We don't want to go in the back lounge with him anymore.
Ripper Owens, while a metal god in his own right, isn't perfect. Here's the deal. So long as he's soaring sonically in the octave attic or bellowing beneath the baseboards in the octave sub-basement, Ripper Owens sounds fucking incredible. Where the shine begins to wear off a bit is when he's trapped in that auditory DMZ somewhere in the middle. His head voice just sounds... well, fucking whiny, for lack of a better word, and therein lies Demolition, and to a lesser extent, Jugulator's core flaw. In order to keep up with the Joneses, Priest, for the first time in their careers, hopped on the groove metal bandwagon and down-tuned their guitars to a C sharp or a drop C, if I'm not mistaken. Consequently, Ripper, who, as we've established, sounds goddamn mind-blowing in the upper and lower registers, finds himself just stranded somewhere in the middle with baffling frequency, and not just on the record, but live as well. Consequently, Ripper, who as he's proven countless times in the past, can hit every note in Painkiller in its original tuning without breaking a sweat, finds himself using that off-malign, whiny-ass head voice during songs that in standard tuning would have been full-on screamers. In my eyes, Jugulator succeeded because it picked a goddamn lane and it stayed there. They weren't experimenting with everything from folk rock to dark wave in the span of, 12 tracks. It was a tech thrash record, plain and simple. Some groove elements, but for the most part, technical thrash metal. Demolition, however, sees the band expanding in two diametrically opposed musical directions simultaneously and failing to execute either effectively as a result. I remain stubbornly convinced that if Priest had just released a goddamn rap rock album and stuck with it instead of this non-committal, oh, this track has some pseudo-rapping, and oh, but this track sounds like Sad Wings of Destiny, and oh, but now this song sounds like fucking Cold Chamber bullshit, they would still have been received more positively than they ultimately were with Demolition. Pick a fucking lane, Grandpa, and just what in nebulous hell is up with this packaging? I mean, it's bad when someone like me, who can barely make a convincing stick figure using Adobe Photoshop, can easily identify every single one-click Photoshop technique used to illustrate this fucking album jacket. I mean, look at this! Look at it! This should be required viewing for every hack on DeviantArt who thinks digital art doesn't suck ass through a penile catheter. Best track? Well, Demolition, while Terra bad in the overall, isn't without its standouts. Bloodsuckers, Feed on Me, Machine Man. But I'd personally say one-on-one for the simple fact that it seems like a bit more of an extension of the Jugulator sound more than anything. But again, what is with those low-register vocals? You've got this world-renowned musical banshee, and you're using him like the bass in a barbershop quartet. Take off the fucking leash, Glenn Tipton. You've got a Ferrari in the garage. Stop rocking the Yugo. Worst track? Everything the fuck else. I'm sorry. Demolition is a jack of all trades and a master of none. Ripper didn't let Priest down here. Judas Priest let down Judas Priest, which is why this record sold about half as many copies as the album that preceded it. Sadly, definitely not recommended. Far and away, the worst album in Judas Priest's discography. Next. Pop quiz, Rageaholics. What do popular bands do when they fuck up the songwriting, they fuck up the recording, and they fuck up the band's creative direction? Oh, well, there can only be one answer. They fire the singer who had nothing at all to do with any of the above. Welcome to heavy metal logic. See also Black Sabbath. By 2003, when the original four non-child molesting members of Judas Priest congregated in Birmingham, England to discuss the track selection of this badass Metalogy box set right here, let's be real, Ripper Owens was pretty much already fired, and Rob Halford was pretty much already back in the band. Halford kind of needed it. His first solo record, Resurrection, was a goddamn beast, but Crucible, his most recent turd at the time, yeah, not so much. I mean, why even have this meeting if not to reunite? Did they really need to confer with Rob Halford to decide, gee, I think you've got another thing coming, probably belongs in this fucking thing? Yeah, probably the fuck not. Thin Veil, meet Ploy.
I'm sitting in the kitchen thinking, oh my God, I'm back in the band, we've reunited. The world has no idea what's just taken place here, And it was a very, very powerful thing, but it was terribly British. I mean, it's such a British way of doing it, Having a cup of tea, shall I get back together? Yeah, all right, then see you later.
So the Metal Gods reunited, which was great and all, except someone neglected to invite Rob Halford's voice. Yeah, we get it. Ripper's something like 20 years younger than Halford, but he's also 46 years old today. The same age Halford was when he was croaking his way through the recording sessions for that shitty 2 album with Trent Reznor. But Rob Halford is one of the greatest singers on the planet, and as such, he did what every great singer does when age begins to claim their pipes. He filled out his voice in other ways. Thus, Rob Halford's modern, bellowing, operatic baritone was birthed and has been going strong ever since. He can and does still hit the occasional scream on 2005's Angel of Retribution, but you kind of get the sense he almost doesn't get to pick what note he hits. Rob Halford hitting high notes in 2014 is like fucking Rosie O'Donnell. You just sort of kneel down, push really hard, and pray for the best. Angel of Retribution is a fantastic record, a well-crafted, if occasionally banal grab bag of all the essential shapes, colors, and flavors of Judas Priest. It does kind of lack cohesion and focus a a bit, but this album was never really meant to stand alongside the Painkillers and British Steels of the world, because in many ways it's barely an album. It's a statement of intent, a realignment to the band's core virtues, and a reminder that in 2005, Ken Downing, Glenn Tipton, and Rob Halford can still write a hell of a metal song. Best track? I'm going to turn a few heads with this one. Hell, it's something I've had to come to terms with myself, but I love Worth Fighting For. While most of the material on the album is somewhat generic, easily forgotten, and somewhat interchangeable, I find myself at improbable times of the day or night suddenly humming the lyrics to this stupid fucking song. Maybe it's the fact that it was clearly written with his, hometown of Phoenix in mind, with all that western cruising down the highway on a Harley-esque evocative imagery. But it twists my nipples in all the right directions as far as I'm concerned. Worst track? Is it even legal to say anything but Loch Ness? I mean, what was the pitch meeting for this ever-loving abomination? I'm thinking to close out the comeback album, we should pinch out a track that's 9 quadrillion years long, says nothing, builds to nothing, and repeats the chorus more times than a fucking Gregorian chant. I don't know whose idea it was, but I have to believe it's the same pulsating dickhead that wrote the last 3 Iron Maiden albums. Angel of Retribution. A simply good record that, thanks to the fact that it's sandwiched between Demolition and Nostradamus, comes out looking like a fucking Mozart composition. Next. Gotta level with you all here. I sorta kinda patently avoided being exposed to this album until this review. Like, I've always found the fomenting fanboy rage over Nostradamus from longtime Priest fans to be more than a little bit quizzical. Not because Nostradamus is necessarily the best record ever made, but because the band informed us all from the outset of exactly what it was going to be, a pompous, overblown heavy metal opera. The band's first full-blown foray to the hallowed halls of power metal. Pissing and moaning about the album the band said was going to be power metal, and is power metal, simply because it's power metal, is a bit absurd. If you weren't a fan of the genre, the band warned you ahead of time that you weren't gonna like it, and you bought it and presumably immediately complained any fucking way. I spied the bloated varicose golem that was Nostradamus materializing on the horizon a good month before it released, and even if I hadn't, the fucking band warned my ass, hence the fact that it's the only Priest record I still do not physically own. Having finally parked my ass and stewed in its rich fatty juices, I have to say I'm a little surprised at how little I actually hate it. Maybe it's because I'm acquainted with the lengthy power metal epics in the genre like Iced Earth's superb Gettysburg trilogy from the Glorious Burden, which for my money remains the band's finest hour, but for whatever reason, I guess it just kind of works for me. It beats the shit out of more wanky fare like Man of War's 2007 abomination by the name of Gods of War. Best track? While it's hard to single out a single track in one seamless work like this, I dig the shit out of Pestilence and Plague. Worst? Honestly, leaking the title track in advance of this record was probably one of the single biggest mistakes of Priest's career. This song bites. It goes through the motions of superior fare like Painkiller or Hellrider, but lacks any of the drive and keeps its nuts in a conveniently sized hand purse for ease of disposal. Look, I'm not saying I'm particularly likely to actively seek out Nostradamus for some light listening, but appraised objectively, Nostradamus is actually a fairly well-structured, extremely well-performed little power metal rock opera. It's a different look for Priest, and it can certainly be argued that maybe they should have released it as a Halford or Glenn Tipton side project, but it's not quite as heinous a musical affront as I was previously led to believe. That said, Priest fans farted at it, and it was abundantly clear that with 2014's long overdue offering, the boys from Birmingham had something to prove. Enter Redeemer of Souls.
Judas Priest held a press conference announcing their farewell world tour, with Richie Faulkner taking the place of KK Downing, who has announced his retirement.
Obviously, when Ken informed us he was leaving, we had to think long and hard. We had two choices. We either carry on and we do the farewell tour, which is what we wanted, and what we wanted the fans. We think what the fans wanted, or we could have ended the band. So, obviously, we had to find the right guy, and we honestly couldn't have found any better than this guy.
Redeemer of Careers is a more apt title, but you go right ahead and do your thing, Priest. Who am I to argue? Particularly with an unrelenting collective of kick-ass like this. Far and away the finest thing the Priest has recorded in years. And best of all, rather than aping Euro power metal a la Nostradamus, aping industrial metal and new metal a la Demolition, or aping them fucking selves a la Angel of Retribution, commingled with the somewhat flagrant Defenders and Painkiller worship are a few gems that create a wholly new, utterly distinctive sound for the band, even 4 decades into their Methuselaic existence. That's impressive no matter who the fuck you are. I don't know what kind of space Viagra you're slamming into your veins, Priest, but share some with Iron Maiden, please. That band hasn't caught the faintest scent of a decent record since the year 2000. While Halford's shriek is uncharacteristically subdued, which at his age it probably should be, the rich, powerful, operatic baritone he's cultivated for the last 3 albums soars throughout the fist-pumping proceedings. New guitarist Richie Faulkner is excellent without overshadowing the unparalleled technical brilliance of Glenn Tipton, but most importantly, he seems to have given the band several cc's of fresh blood. Is Redeemer perfect? Oh hell no, not with that production, but I have to confess to feeling more than a few pangs of disappointment when I see metal fans and publications, major ones, proclaiming Redeemer of Souls to be the watery shits for that reason alone. What irony then that many of these same publications have reviewed far lower production affairs from classic bands like Venom, Sodom, Bathory, and Celtic Frost, and pretty nary a word about the subpar production in those cases. Different genres, I get it, but this is metal, you asshat. Listen to Bathory's The Return. That album sounds like a chorus of chainsaws on a construction site adjacent to a helipad recorded on an answering machine in a trash can across the street. Grow a dick. Thus far, the album's standout has proven to be an infernal barrage of thunderous guitar work and hellish screams entitled Halls of Valhalla, during which Rob Halford, now well into his 60s, unleashes one of the most raw, high-pitched shrieks of his goddamn career. Worst track, Cold-Blooded, I think. It's not that it's objectively terrible, which speaks to the album's overall quality. It's more that it sounds more like a discarded track from Rob's days in Fight than a proper Priest tune. Make no mistake, Fight rules, or rather exactly one half of one album by Fight rules, but it's a completely distinct band with a wholly distinct sound. How many times did your grandma tell you, Rob, don't mix your peas and mashed potatoes? But honestly, when your weakest moment sounds like the strongest moment of another bitchin' band, you're probably doing something right. Redeemer of Souls, far and away the strongest album since Jugulator. Cannot recommend it highly enough. Well, that tears at Rageaholics the complete career, of studio albums at least, of one of my favorite bands, the mighty Judas Priest. I'd apologize for the running length. At least I would if I gave a shit, but you know better than all that. I'm RazörFist, and I shall return for further excursions into the ethereal mists of the metal mythos. God fucking speed.
I've got to get back on the road now. Judas Priest is still coming for you, America. Take it easy.
The cracks appear, the brings us to this status, ready to explode.
What would you say if you saw Rob Halford right now?
I'd jump his bones.